listeners. It's good to have you with us today. My name is Henrik Palmgren, and we go out worldwide over the internet through our website. Wherever you are in the world, I hope you are comfy and hungry for some hidden and, to most people, unknown history of the ancient world, primarily British history. And today we have Baram Blackett and Alan Wilson with us on the line. They are writing partners, and I know that Alan have been studying British history for about 30 years. A few of their book titles include King Arthur and the Charters of the Kings, the King Arthur Conspiracy, Moses in the Hieroglyphs, the Discovery of the Ark of the Covenant, and the Trojan War of 650 BC. And hidden and unknown history of the ancient world is always a fascinating subject, and Alan and Baram are both new voices to me, so I'm very excited to have them with us today. I want to mention their website, of course. You can head on over there and check out some of their titles, some of their information, articles, and so forth. Simply go to kingarthurslegacy.com. kingarthurslegacy.com will get you there. You can read more. I also want to mention that Alan is also one of the speakers that will be attending the upcoming ARC convention in Bath in the UK. February the 20th and 21st. Other guest speakers at the convention include Michael Tessarion, Ralph Ellis, Neil Haig, Neil Kramer, Kevin P. Miller, Leo Rutherford, Daniel Tatman, Andrew Johnson, who we had on the show with us recently. We also have Peter Taylor and myself are going to do talks at the conference. So we want to see you there, obviously. We're not too far away now, about 2 weeks, and tickets are limited. So I urge that you head on over to the website arcconvention.org. That's arcconvention.org for more information about tickets, location, and the schedule. We are going to begin to talk with Baram Blackett, and he'll give us a bit of an introduction both to his and to Alan's work and some of the background and some of the research that they've been doing here throughout the years. So with that, Baram, welcome to Red Ice Radio. We are very excited to have you with us on the line today. Thank you for coming on.
Yes, thank you. Yes. To start the show, I think it's best to furnish the listeners with a succinct background of myself and Alan Wilson. Alan Wilson has been studying history since 1956. He began this as a hobby, basically, on a more casual basis. And he is also a university graduate and has degrees in both economics and history. And then he went into industry and became a senior management consultant at the highest level. Basically, that's Alan's background. And he began collaborating with me on a more serious basis in 1976.
Excellent. And tell us about some of the work that you and Alan have been doing, and how you got involved, I guess, in the research as well.
Yeah, I will come to that in a minute, yes. Myself, Baram Blackett, I am a construction engineer. And basically, I have been collaborating with Alan since 1976 in a rotating manner, and it's been snowballing, basically escalating since that date. My job as a hobby, I've been in a rock band and still am. Mozart's Ghost is the rock band, and that was a hobby which I started, and it's morphed, and it's now we've got some really prestigious rock tracks.
There you go.
This is Mozart's Ghost. It's just a hobby, basically. Like Alan's hobby was history and economics. Then this is the basic foundation of European and American cultural heritage was founded in 1988. We began, that's myself and Alan, to do serious historical collaboration around 81, 82. We've been lectured at Oxford University twice. We've lectured at Cambridge University twice. And Alan and I have done the Beamish Lecture in the United States of America. This is the most prestigious circuit, which is usually kept for senates and presidents and so forth. It's regarded as the highest lecture circuit in the United States. Our research and our story is based on the most reliable and respected sources. We start with a clean sheet from the earliest extant evidence. In other words, we don't speculate, we don't use unreliable sources, we only go on proven solid foundations. Our references include the Brutus of England, Nennius, the Land of Charters, and there's others far too numerous to mention. We have, over the years, gained a very good support team, and we have at least full-time now 12 enthusiastic pioneers who help us on a regular basis, particularly with the internet and in marketing the books. But I reiterate, we do not use speculation or guesswork. This is not modern history. This is not New Age. This is based on physical, tangible evidence of artifacts and relics. Mm. I'll give you one example. In the London Times newspaper, on the 22nd of September 2008, there was a headline: "A Christian amulet," that's AMULET, amulet, "ruined my life, is not a hoax." Now, a Christian amulet is basically a cross. It's an electrum cross. This is regarding Quentin Hutchinson's find of an early Christian cross. Now, this artifact came clash on with all the academics in the universities and all the professors and so forth. So he's basically come up against an establishment with a closed mind and a preconceived idea of history and how it should be. Mm. Now, this is the main point of that particular discovery by Quentin Hutchinson is that we also found a cross. We found a cross in St. Peter's Church with Richard Melbourne, and that has been authenticated by the most sophisticated scientific analysis possible, and it's been authenticated to be genuine, ancient cross, and it's electrum, which is basically gold and silver with impurities. We've also got a cross, it's almost similar in size, which is 9 inches long and approximately 2 pounds in weight. Now, this artifact has been, I reiterate, it's been authenticated, and it's basically the same as the cross found by Christian Hutchinson. Mm-hmm. Now, we experienced exactly the same obstacles and antagonism as Hutchinson did. Sorry, it's Quentin Hutchinson. I memory didn't. Quentin Hutchinson. Mm. This find disrupted his life, mainly because, and indeed as we experienced it in exactly almost identical fashion, the conventional academics usually tend to have a preconceived mindset within an inaccurate framework, meaning that they have a certain way of thinking. They don't have an open mind. They don't start with a clean sheet. And this particular perception pertains with British history. So basically what it indicates is we have exposed and revealed a Christian kingdom founded in apostolic times, and it is now revealed at last. So basically it's not just a cross. We also have found other artifacts, including memorial stones, accession stones, and these basically are relevant to King Arthur II of Glamorgan and Gwent. Mm-hmm. And they've also been authenticated by universities to be genuine. Unfortunately, we seem to have come up against a certain small percentage in Britain, a very small percentage, which I mean by about 2% of people who don't like this history, because it sets various aspects of religion. It upsets a sort of a global plan, a new world plan, mm-hmm. And well, at least to think it does. No, personally, I don't think it will, and I don't think it should, because I am personally a Roman Catholic myself, and I've always been a Roman Catholic from a Roman Catholic family, and if anything, it actually fleshes out the reality of these biblical characters. Rather than being fictional characters, that actually become real and living. And I don't know if you've heard about Professor Thompson in Copenhagen University. He wrote a paper, and he published a paper saying that all these biblical characters are actually fictional. Well, that's not the case. They are actually real. They were real people. They really existed, and there is a lot of substance in these not just these histories, but also the religion.
So, give us a little bit of more background in terms of some of these artifacts then that you're talking about, and what the implications of this is, because I guess what you're saying here as well is that the history books needs to be rewritten according to some of the discoveries that you and Alan has brought forward, right?
Well, I will quote, there's an old saying, if we don't move with modern times, you tend to get left behind in the past. History can be a paradox. This is a paradox of history, and we have to move with the times, or we'll still be all living in caves, so to speak. In some ways, it's been cultural genocide. They've been brushing under the carpet, trying to suppress histories which don't suit, or at least they perceive it not to suit, various political and religious sacred cows, basically. And that's a well-known expression in Britain, and I also believe it's well-known in Europe and America, sacred cows that they protect. And it also creates a situation whereby a lot of books have got to be at least altered and modified. It's a renewed insight, a fresh new insight into history, which I think is long overdue, actually. I mean, the books are books. We've got the King Arthur Conspiracy, Moses and the Hieroglyphs, the discovery of the Ark of the Covenant, and the latest book we're bringing out is the Trojan War of 650 BC. These books are on the website and available, and basically it's such a voluminous subject. We could literally go on for about 15 one-hour programs, you know, and I've also found that it has a much greater and broader global interest than we first anticipated. And I'm talking about Australia, Europe, Canada, all over the world, basically.
So what can you say in regards to some of the objects and some of the main points that what would you mention to a person who's listening and don't know what you're...
Yeah, one of the first artifacts that were found was in the excavation of St. Peter's Church in Glamorgans, which is in South Wales in the United Kingdom. Professor Talbot basically led that excavation, and in a niche in the wall of this church was a sword-shaped stone, which inscribed in Latin, King Arthur, son of King Myric, basically, but that was written in Latin. That was authenticated. That's the first find. And across, there's also another artifact we found, and we now have quite a collection of artifacts, including daggers, an ancient Dark Age helmet, and various other interesting relics and artifacts. Maybe Alan would like to shed light more on his our latest book, The Trojan War. He's sitting here with me now, and perhaps he would like to take over for a moment.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you very much, Baram. Looking forward to talking maybe more with you later on as well then. But thank you for now.
I'll probably finish up, finishing off the show, or basically towards the end, okay?
Okay.
Here's Alan now.
Excellent. Thank you for that introduction. Do we have Alan with us?
Hello, Henrik.
Hi, Alan. Great to talk to you. Thank you for coming on Red Ice Radio.
Oh, delighted. My colleague probably has explained to you that we started really serious research in 1976. Basically, our ambitions were limited, and we just wanted to deal with a problem that is not a problem, and that was King Arthur. And you've got a situation where in the east side of Britain, in England, they think he's a mystery, and in the west side of Britain, in Wales, they know all about him. The problem is a language problem, in that certainly up until sort of 1860, 90% more of the Welsh only spoke Welsh, Khumric, and they couldn't understand and speak English. And so there was not just a cultural divide, there was a linguistic divide. And that was solved by the English Parliament, who in 1846 simply sacked every Welsh school teacher in Wales and replaced him with an Englishman. And so you had kids sitting in school who couldn't understand a word of English with teachers who couldn't speak a word of Welsh. And it's called the treachery of the blue books in Wales. Well, resulting from all this, there has been a constant Anglicization, English sort of tide, as it were, which has tended to overwhelm the native culture and histories. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
It goes back to Richard III of England, about 1400, who made it as far as he could illegal for anybody in Wales to hold our own writing materials. You couldn't have paper or pen. Henry IV Bolingbroke in 1400, we were fighting a war against the Welsh, and they were easily sort of columns of English people moving in, and he made it illegal to own a manuscript or a pen or paper in Wales. Mm-hmm. And the Welsh solved this because they had an ancient alphabet, which they simply was a straight stroke alphabet, and you could cut it onto a piece of wood. And so they simply cut the alphabet on strips of timber and sent those around, and they were able to pass their messages around that way. So with all this going on, printing was brought into London by Caxton in 1474, and the English Parliament immediately made it illegal for printing to be done in Wales. So you couldn't actually print in Wales until 1692, when the damage was getting done. And so there's been this sort of divide, and it's tended to make people who spoke Welsh or spoke with a Welsh accent to be regarded as a second-class citizen or an idiot, or not very bright. And this is patently, was patently obvious when I was young, And so you have a history preserved in Wales, which goes back to about 1500 BC, right? Mm-hmm. And you've got a sort of Anglo-Saxon idea in England, with the Anglo-Saxons arriving in numbers around 550 AD, right? And knowing very little or nothing of what went on before. So if you take it as a series of signposts, you've got an invasion of Britain around 1500 BC, right? 3,500 years ago, which came from Syria, okay? Mm-hmm. It's led by a princess, actually, Albine. Now, they preserved in the records of England and in the records of Wales the story of Albine. And there's detail in it, how the king in Syria was named Dungi or Diocletian, right? And he had 33 provinces that he ruled. He actually made some of his daughters rulers of provinces, and he had a big enemy named Labana. Well, it wasn't until they dug up, I think it was Leonard Woolley dug up up in Syria, and he was doing this in 1922 to 34. And he discovered the necropolis of the emperors of the third dynasty of Ur. Huge buildings which were once 2 stories above ground and 2 stories underground, numbers of rooms and passages. And the greatest of these was Dungi, Diocletian, you see. And he ruled 33 provinces. And during his reign, the first Hittite king made a big raid into his territories, his enemy named Labana. And in the necropolis of Dungi, there was a room with votive religious items on a table, reclining bulls, reclining lambs, and so on, and circular, like balls of crystal. The strange thing is that when they dug up the Lexden Mound in England in the 20th century, the Lexden Mound is at Colchester and is attributed to a British king. They found in there a room with a votive table, and on it were reclining bulls, reclining lambs, little models, and round balls, identical. And these sort of things don't appear to be accidental. And there's a hell of a lot more than I'm telling you right now. So what happens is that, apart from that, there's a lot of other evidence that the invasion from ancient Syria was real. Now, the Khumric people, Khumri, Welsh is not the correct name of the nation, the correct name is Khumry, right?
How do you spell that, by the way?
KHUMRY.
Thank you.
KHUMRY. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, the funny thing is that the second migration, I'm going to skip along a bit fast because if you ever want more detail, we can do it. The second migration is Brutus arriving with his confederates. There were 4 or 5 grouped sort of nations, shall we say, or tribes. And he arrived in Britain from Troy, around 500 BC. Now, he's reputed to be the great-grandson or grandson of Aeneas of Troy. Well, this is nowhere near 1200 BC of the Greeks. And we later found that the Franks had a list of kings descended from Antenor of Troy, which again took them back to about 650 BC. The Romans had a tremendous argument, a huge debate in Rome, because the Roman histories around 50 BC, it was in the time of Augustus, was saying Trojan War, 650 BC, which was contrary to the Greek mathematicians. Now, you've got to remember Greek mathematicians, not historians. Flavius Josephus was writing around 70 AD in Rome, with access to all the great libraries of the world that had been stolen and taken to Rome. Plus, he was given all the records from Jerusalem by Titus. And he mocked and jeered at the 1200 BC Greek thing, and again, he was opting for about 700 or 600 BC. So we got four nations, in a sense. We got the Hebrews, the Romans, the Franks, and the British, all putting the Trojan War at 650 BC. So this is the take on it. Now, the kings of Wales descend directly from Brutus, right? They claim that descent, okay? There's a statue of Brutus, an Etruscan statue, in Rome in a museum, which is confidently dated to be prior to 400 BC. The interesting thing is around the plinth is an inscription, right? And it's in the same straight line stroke alphabet as the British have. Now, Julius Caesar, when he came to Britain, described the British alphabet, right? And he said it is similar to the Greek, okay? Ammianus Marcellinus is supposed to have also mentioned it. But the point is that there are stones in Scotland, England, and Wales which bear this same strange ancient stroke alphabet, right? And so we started to look at many things. We started off with the ambition of King Arthur. But King Arthur, it was so simple. We quickly sort of got through that one. The historian Polydore Virgil, who was working for Henry VIII, said, hey, this King Arthur's impossible, because he fights the Romans and he also fights the Saxons. He must be 200, 250 years old. Well, the Welsh records actually say there are two King Arthurs, King Arthur I and King Arthur II. And both are well recorded in the manuscripts and in the genealogies. They were genealogy mad, naming everybody's ancestry back to the, Noah. And so finding Arthur I and finding Arthur II was not difficult, because there's a massive information in Wales on exactly where they are. So they tell you actually where to go. Now, I'll give you a sort of a sideline on this. We're told by incredible number of writers in England and Canada, America, everywhere, that nobody can find the Battle of Baden, right? Which Arthur fought. Well, that's very strange, because there's a description in a Welsh text telling how people went to the army gathering ground, describing the topography and at least two place names, right? And they then gather the army and they leave at about 9 o'clock in the morning for getting to the battle site at noon. And the battle site is Mynydd Baden. Now, it's on the Ordnance Survey maps, so it's not hard to find. And on the detailed maps, it's Maes Cadlower, field of battle area. And the road up to it is Ffordd Gyfraith, in Welsh, right? Which means road to the tumult. And the place names go on, and the local people know all about it. And a local person wrote a book on it, on how the battle was fought in about 1870. So instead of not being able to find the Battle of Baden, all you've got to do is buy a government map. The same thing is said about the Battle of Camlan. Nobody knows where it was fought. Dear. Apparently Arthur and his armies were in Brittany. They arrived back in Britain at a beach called Longbourn. Well, there's a nice big flat beach over in Cardigan Bay, ideal for a number of ships to come along into this sand beach, like a D-Day. And there's a farm by it, and the farm is called Longbourn Farm. They've now changed the name, but they call it Landboth, try and conceal it. A prince named Geraint was mortally wounded in the battle, okay? Now, he was then taken inland, and they sent over to Brittany for a stone coffin in which to bury him. And another prince named Bledry was injured. Well, there's a stone nearby with Bledry written on it, and 3 miles inland from the battle site on the beaches, where there are grave mounds on the battle site, by the way, is Bedd Geraint Farm, the grave of Geraint Farm. And there's a whacking big grave mound on it. Now, after this, the defeated Modred and his army flee up northwards, and Arthur pursues them. And there is a winding valley further north to the east of Dalgethley, and it's called Hamlin Valley. And above it is Hamlin Mountain. It's a narrow, pitching, difficult little valley, and it's typical of the sort of Greek Thermopylae idea, where a small group could block it against a larger force and delay them,
Yeah, I see.
Well, when we sent people up there, the locals said, "Oh yeah, big battle up here, yeah, King Arthur, they knew all about it." And it took 3 days, and it started down by there, and and the locals know all about it. You'd think actually that Wales was on the dark side of the moon, and Oxford and Cambridge have never heard of the place,
But
and I don't know what these people are doing.
There's obvious. This must have a connection with what you said before. The fact that the Welsh or the Khumric language was banned and things like this. It has to do with the suppression of history. Maybe you can talk about that and what the reasons for this might be.
Well, firstly, the Bishop of Rome appointed the Vatican librarian Cardinal Baronius to investigate this history about 1530. And he came up with Christianity arrived in Britain in the last year of Tiberius, okay?
Yeah.
Which is 37 AD. The British writers Gildas and Nennius died, I think, in 822. Gildas is a contemporary of Arthur II, okay, 6th century. They also said the same thing, right? Now, the problem is, if you got the Holy Family in Britain at that date, it's prior to Rome, right? Now, King Caradoc and his family became Christian, and they were taken to Rome in 51 AD, okay? And Caradoc's sister, Claudia, married an eminent Roman sort of royal person, and she was put on trial in Rome for being a Christian, because she wouldn't worship Jupiter and the rest of them, you see. And Marshall and other poets record this, and it's a fact. And so Christianity was really founded in Rome by the British. The first bishop of Rome was Linus, who was the son of King Caradoc. So you've got an immediate problem, haven't you? Now, Christianity didn't arrive in England, right, until 597 AD, when Austin, later called Augustine, went to Kent in the East Coast, right? Well, that's only 560 years after the Welsh, you see, which immediately creates certain problems for the Vatican. And the problems are created because the Welsh genealogies point to ladies of the Holy Family marrying British nobility, princes, and minor kings. That is a problem. So we get Anna, who is a close relative of the Virgin Mary, marrying British king, right? And this is not in one man. It's one of the big princes in West Wales around 900 was Howell the Good, Howell Da, and he confidently traced himself straight back to this ancestor who married Anna, you see. And it gets worse. There's a lot more evidence than this. St. Caradoc, a young contemporary of Arthur II, 6th century, confidently, calmly traced himself back to Anna, you see, who was a daughter of Bellymore, which means great tumult, who is a son of the Virgin Mary. Well, it's known that Jesus had at least 4 brothers and 2 sisters. So, this is on the cards.
So,
go ahead.
I was just going to ask if you can also maybe back up a little bit for us. We are not familiar with the whole background story here. Are you saying then that the the primary people of the up in Wales pretty much have descendants from Syria. We had an invasion from Syria up in the UK.
The first invasion was from Syria. The second invasion came from the Trojan area of western Turkey, right?
Yeah.
Now, the alphabet in Britain is also found in Etruria, Etruscan lands all over Italy, right?
Right.
It's also found in Rhaetia, which is Switzerland. It's also found in the Aegean on Lemnos, right?
Yeah.
It's also found right through Asia Minor. And when Austin Layard dug up Nineveh in 1846, he found, I think, 25,000 clay tablets of the archives of the Assyrian King Emperors, Sent them to London, and when they were looking at them in London, people said, oh, look at this. There's the British alphabet on some of these. Now, we're talking of tablets written around 700 BC, you see. The same alphabet turns up in Palestine, and the same alphabet turns up in Egypt.
Oh, really? Now, what is the name? Has the alphabet given a name?
Coelbren, Coelbren. Coelbren. Well, the thing is that this then started us thinking, and we started in Britain. Llewellyn Sion, right? Llewellyn Sion Sion. He preserved the cipher to the alphabet. So we said that symbol is an A, that's a B, that's a C, okay? That enabled us, if we took an Etruscan inscription or a British inscription on a stone, right? You put the appropriate letter, modern letter, under the Coelbren sign, and then you get a string of modern letters, which actually read straight out into Welsh. The same thing happened with Etruscan. We can read Etruscan. Nobody else can do it. We've written to universities, offering to help them.
What you're talking about here is basically your own version of the Rosetta Stone, where you have Etruscan next to.
It's bigger than that. It's bigger than that. Yeah. We can read it straight off.
Yeah.
And so we then moved back in time. We did the Rhaetian ones. They're not many. We did several of the larger Etruscan inscriptions in Italy. And the point is that out of it comes very valuable historical information, immensely valuable statements, We then read the major inscription of a stone that was found in 1876 on Lemnos Island. It's now in the Athens Museum. And that describes the people gathering there under Brutus to come to Britain, which is correct in the histories. We then tackle it's not difficult, because you merely take the inscription, put the modern letter underneath, and out comes a string of modern letters, which are Welsh words.
Sure.
And in Etruscan, it's easy, because they put little dots between each word, so you know that's the end of the word. You follow it? Now, the only problem is to decide whether it reads from right to left or left to right. Usually, it's right to left.
Right.
But sometimes it's called a bustahedron. It goes along the top from right to left, and then the next line left to right, and the next one right to left. You follow me? Like a zigzag snake? So we've been reading Etruscan and reading the stuff in Pelasgian in Asia Minor. What is happening is that we've got a track of the people with the alphabet which mirrors and matches the track of the people in the histories.
I see.
So we know that which people we're dealing with. Now, the Assyrian emperors had a name for the 10 tribes of Israel. KHUMRY. No, the Welsh always said we're the 10 tribes, but the English didn't like it.
The Khumri or the Khumri, then.
Khumri.
Yeah.
Now, the Assyrians called them the Khumri. When they were moving through Asia Minor, what happened is Sennacherib, the emperor of Assyria, got himself assassinated by two sons. He was in a temple praying, and in 687 BC, he was killed by his sons. There was a civil war with the head of the throne chasing his brothers. The 10 tribes took the opportunity, moved off, and if you read the second book of Esdras, chapter 14, it tells how they take off and they cross the Euphrates River, both the branches, it's a Y-shaped, and going west. The Greeks picked up on them, and they called the Khumri the Khimmeroi. And they're well attested. So there's no lost 10 tribes of Israel. The dogs get lost. People lose wallets, cars. You lose car keys, or little children get lost. Does this make sense?
It's a
A million people on the march don't get lost.
It's a convenient statement to say that it's been lost. That's what you're saying.
Yes.
But
it's very convenient.
One thing I want to ask you here right away, though, is in regards to the people who have been suppressing this kind of information. I guess the question is, do you think that they know what is stated? That, in other words, can they read this alphabet and have come to the conclusion that...
No, I think the present generation can't, Henrik. I don't think the present generation... I think they've been educated into a sort of a... Don't look at that.
Right.
Or that's taboo.
Right.
I think at one time, most of the decipherments that were going on in the 19th century were being done by clergymen. And it's fairly obvious that when they saw some of them, they absolutely, needed to go out for fresh air. In those days, you've got to remember, if you said the wrong thing too badly, you might get defrocked and lose your job as a priest, right?
That's
and
right.
you would be in the gutter with a tin can begging for pennies. So there was there are all sorts of pressures on people, social and otherwise, plus the fact of indoctrination,
Yeah.
So we looked at one, it's the Songs of the Graves, immensely important Welsh text,
Mm-hmm.
And the Reverend Robert Williams claimed to translate it in 1867. And he said there are about 183 different names in here of buried people of the past, and the references are so brief that they're meaningless, right? Now, in 1958, scholar W.H. Thomas gave the Rees Memorial Lecture, and he said, there's not 183 names, there's less than 70, maybe less than 50. Which means there's a bit more detail. So we looked at it, and we did what we always do. We took one word at a time, one word at a time, and we analyzed it. There are less than 25 names. And instead of 183 vague statements, we got 25 very detailed statements about where these illustrious people are buried.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's been commonplace for Arthurian writers to say there's only one line in the Songs of the Graves about Arthur, and it says, "Concealed forever is the grave of Arthur." It doesn't say that at all. Anoith, if it's one word, means concealed. But A on its own and Noith on its own means a bare exposed place. It's the grave of Arthur. It goes on to say that it's a wet place, damp, it's very windy, and it's narrow, and it then gives the name of the field where he's buried.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, what you got to realize, years ago, going back a century or two, they had what they called tithe maps, and these were very well drawn. So you get a map of the local parish or village. Right? Each field would be drawn, and in it they would put its acreage, its size. So you'd have field number 1, they give a number, right, on the map.
Yeah.
And they have a book alongside, and they do number 1, they give the acreage, they write down who owned it, or if there was a tenant farmer who rented it from him, and then they wrote down the name of the field. Every field in Wales had a name. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Now, these tithe maps then contain invaluable information because you can read the history in the fields. The field of bloody conflict, the field of the conference, and, you can actually read the history, and it's crazy. So, if you're looking for the field of Maes Mavelw, you're looking for the field, we think, of the drunken helplessness, right?
Yeah.
Does all that make sense?
Well, not really, because I think there
was a conference called with Saxons and the Brits after the war, where the Saxons were defeated. The Saxons asked for a conference. Both sides came unarmed, ostensibly. They all drank too much beer. And then the Saxons pulled out concealed weapons and massacred 363 British noblemen. The field of drunken helplessness. And another field then is the field of the quarrel. So you can work out all sorts of things, right?
Right. Okay, I see what you mean. And so have you and Baram also traveled around and seen some of these stones for yourself and on the spot in museums translated, or how have you gone about this?
Yeah, of course we do. We've been at it for 30 years. Of course we do.
Yeah.
We've walked more hills and fields and mountains than we want to mention. We've worn out a few shoes. Yeah. The point is that you can find this field, right? And it describes Arthur. It says, calls him the Angry Red Sword, one of his epithets, the Knight with another epithet, the Wrathful One, and so on. And so there are 2 whole verses on Arthur, and where he's buried precisely. But the problem is, they also mention then where significant members of the Holy Family are buried. And that's a problem.
And the Holy, what do you mean with the Holy Family? What is that?
From Jerusalem. They fled from Jerusalem after the crucifixion.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't go to the south of France. They would go to the south of France because the trade route was up the River Rhone, a few miles across country to the Loire, downriver the Loire, I think it's, and then by ship across to Britain. Mm-hmm. That was the route. Nobody sailed all the way down around Spain and Bay of Biscay and that. That's the trade route. That's archaeologically proved and all. So the Holy Family arrived in Britain 37 A.D.
37 A.D. And do you know why they chose to take refuge up at the British Isles?
They're coming to ancient kinsmen, the 10 tribes.
Yeah, they want to go back to the homeland, as it were, huh?
Well, they're coming to ancient kinsmen who would give them shelter.
Yeah.
And Britain in 37 A.D., the Romans hadn't even got near Britain.
So do you think...
in other words, history is starting to take a totally different shape.
Absolutely, I can understand that. And so do you think then that the consequent Roman invasion of Britain has to been for the purpose of eradicating a lot of this information as well, to kind of stamp down and, as you say, ultimately ban even the language of the Welsh people?
The Romans would have not been so interested in language, but they may have other motives. And if I said what they are, I would like listeners and yourself to realize I'm speculating a bit. Mm-hmm. Some of the main texts tell how Anna marries Big British Prince, right? But there appear to have been at least 2 Annas, because one text says British noble prince marries Anna, the daughter of the Emperor of Rome, right? Mm-hmm. Well, Claudius, the lame Emperor of Rome, right? He had several wives. One of them only lasted 4 months, right? Her name was Anna Patina. And she had a daughter named Anna, who Claudius pushed aside. So there was an Anna floating about who could be the Anna who married the British prince, you see. Mm. So there are all sorts of angles. Now, if the Holy Family of Jerusalem was in Britain, there'd be every reason for the Romans to want to eradicate them. Every reason.
So you basically what you've discovered.
But that's speculation.
Okay, so what you've discovered here in that sense then is where King Arthur where he was buried.
Yes.
Some of the battles, obviously, that has taken place throughout history.
Yes.
And basically where the people came from, that they came from Syria and all the way. One thing that often comes up in these kinds of discussions when we're talking about history and so forth is the reason for the traveling back and forth. Some people have speculated that there have been catastrophes in history which has forced people to move and migrate into different areas. Does that play into this thesis as well, Alan?
Very much so. Firstly, I'll deal with the one little thing. In 1714, a German family was brought over by the English to rule as kings, right? So they'd run out of royalty and they'd all no children, right? Queen Anne had a number of children who died less than a year old. William of Orange and Mary didn't have any kids. And the only way they could find anybody remotely related to their royalty was the Elector of Hanover, who conveniently was a Protestant, and England was a Protestant country. Mm-hmm. And I think there was then the German connection with England, right? And if you read the books of the 19th century, you'd be astonished at the pro-German sort of sentiments before the First World War.
Well, that's right, yes.
And so there was a huge wish to promote Anglo-Saxons and to denigrate anything that wasn't Anglo-Saxon. Yeah. And this is, people don't read the old books like we do, and you don't get the picture. There is no doubt whatsoever that there was this huge desire to crush anything that would be detrimental to this royal family, were necessary for parliamentary government and one thing and the other. So I think that it began as a sort of a political move. It's not racist on the part of the people. Most of the people in this project and who support this project are English. Not Welsh. They're English. To make that clear. And so there's some Scots, there's some Welsh, and some Americans, but they're mainly English people. So I think there was this desire to do this. Now, something titanic happened in Britain. You had the Syrians coming in with Alpine, which can be proved, and there's a lot of evidence. I can go into it in detail if you want it. There's the Brutus invasion, right, 500 BC. You got the Holy Family and the Romans. But in 562, Britain was wrecked by debris falling from a comet.
Okay.
And the majority of the population were destroyed. The various Anglo-Saxon people who'd begun to infiltrate and form settlements along the east coast are known to have moved back to Holland, Heligoland, right? Areas of Heligoland went underwater. Areas in Cardigan Bay and west of Britain went underwater. Part of the Conway Estuary did. The whole of what's called Orchard Ledge, south of Cardiff, went down, and the great harbour of the British is there under the ground, under the sea. That's underwater now. And fields in the Scilly Isles went underwater with the whatever happened. But this comet decimated the population, and huge areas were uninhabitable for 7 to 11 years. And that's how in the Arthurian legends of the medieval times, they talk about the great wastelands where no one can enter, and if you enter, you die. Now, the funny thing is, this comet came from the northeast going southwest. Today, at this time, American investigators from Pennsylvania University, Chicago Museum, and Austin University in Texas are busy beavering away in Bolivia, where in 562, exactly the same year, a comet devastated Bolivia. It destroyed the towns, cities, the temples, the pyramids there, the mud brick, the fortresses, everything, and the survivors were only able to survive back on the beaches. And identical year, identical effect. And that's how all the Roman villas and cities, and that, or Roman style, I should say, style, not Roman, but Roman style buildings in Britain were demolished, destroyed. The idea that the Saxons didn't want to live in big houses and the incoming is a lot of rubbish, you see. And explains also why they were able to penetrate Britain so easily. Because they were going into areas that were recovering, no population hardly, devastated.
So no
for the taking.
No armies, no defense, nothing like that.
Arthur removed the army into Brittany, and he brought it back, and that's how this big battle was fought on the beaches and at Cam Land. He removed the army because he knew he'd need it. What was that? He made sure the army was out of it, and he took it into Brittany, kept it there. Does all this sort of hang together?
We're getting the picture slowly but surely here, and we're trying to paint the picture even more. Absolutely, but it's really interesting, and I want to ask you about this in regards to land bridges and things like this as well. Do you think that could have been destroyed during this when the comet came in, and because we hear stories about the fact that many people were able to cross through land bridges between different areas that we don't have today. The map doesn't look the same today as it did back then. Would you agree with that?
I don't know. You mean between France and Britain?
For instance, absolutely. I mean, there's allegedly tremendous amounts of geological upheaval as well, which means that the maps are different.
Well, the Khumric record does it's a vague statement, say that at one time it was possible for a man to stand and shout and be heard if he had a loud voice across the channel to the other side. And Brittany and what is now Normandy were British possessions, and they always were. And in other words, they maintained those as a buffer against invasion of Britain. And that's pretty well established.
I want to ask you a little bit about different alphabets as well, because there's different researchers out there who are, if you will, in one way looking for what they call the original language, that a lot of different languages obviously are related. I'm thinking of, for instance, if there is a relationship between the language that you've been talking about here now and, for instance, rune scripture, or even the Ogam alphabet that Barry Fell writes about and talks about.
Well, Ogam's in Wales as well as Ireland. And
it is, yeah.
Ogam originally was music. I mean, if you look at it, Ogam is a straight line with a cross in the middle, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, strokes up, bottom, below, or through the straight line, horizontal line. It's music.
Really?
And you could use it as an alphabet. I know Barry Fell caused great confusion because he misidentified all the Coelbren alphabets in America as Irish Ogam, which it's not.
You don't think
so? A child can look at the both alphabets, Coelbren and Ogam, and see that it's not Ogam. And of course, there's more. Well, the American thing. I don't know how much of this you want to go into, but Coelbren alphabet inscriptions down the East Coast and all up through Kentucky and Tennessee.
Right,
in the USA.
They found the Kensington rune stones, one of these, and so forth. But what can you say about
the Brandenburg stone and all that?
Yes. What can you say about the relationship with the rune scripture, like up here in the north, for instance?
Well, similar. That's all I could say. I'm not going to say that I know anything about runes, other than the fact that I've seen them.
Yeah.
But they have a similar, context. They appear to be a similar derivation.
Yes.
What we did here. 1896, Professor Sir John Morris Jones wrote a thesis, and he showed that the language of ancient Egypt and the language of ancient Welsh had a common syntax, which is extraordinary.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, what we've done, we've traced the alphabet from Britain to Italy, Etruria, and Switzerland, back to the Aegean, big inscriptions there, back through Asia Minor, back to Assyria, the Khumri, and back into Palestine. And if the Khumri are the 10 tribes, well, before they got into Israel or Palestine, they were in Egypt, right?
Mm-hmm.
Must have been.
Mm.
Now, I won't deal with it in this program, but they tell you how to decipher and read Egyptian hieroglyphs.
Okay, really now. That is really interesting, absolutely. I want to ask you, Alan, if
that's what we've been concentrating on for years now.
To decipher that and to read it? Oh, okay.
Yes.
Wow, really? That's really interesting.
In other words, it's an unending silent trail.
Absolutely. I want to ask you here, before we carry on any further, if you're interested in doing a second segment with us for our members as well, Alan. We'd love to talk more with you. There's so many more questions for you. So why don't we do like this then? Give out your website and mention some of the book titles that you have out there. And I guess as well, if you would give people let's say they never heard about this before, they're interested in what you've been talking about and want to get a good, I guess, overview or an introduction to the thesis, what would you recommend them to get and research further on?
Well, the books that we've done, we did a few in the beginning. We were primitive in that we didn't realize the size of the problem. And in 1981, we published King Arthur, King of Glamorgan and Gwent, which is a good basic book, right? And we also published then Arthur and the Charters of the Kings, because in South Wales, the Bishop of Llandaff was always a member of the royal family, right? Brother or son of the king. And so the bishop served the king. If the king died, the bishop carried on serving the next king. If the bishop died, they appointed another bishop in the reign. So you get an overlap of bishops and kings from around 400 AD to 1100. Mm-hmm. Now, the last king was killed by Edward I of England in 1300, right? AD. Morgan was his name. The problem you've got, you see, is that Wales is a kingdom, not a principality. So this English idea of princes of Wales is total bloody nonsense. It's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. And they've managed to obliterate a line of 76 successive kings who are clear in the records, who left memorial stones with their names on, and so on and so on. Now, in South Wales, I'm off the target a bit for you, I know. The best book for your people to look at probably is Artorius Rex Discovered, 1986. It gives you a good little background on this. Now, we've also published The King Arthur Conspiracy, Moses in the Hieroglyphs, because that's where we were headed. And we published then The Discovery of the Ark of the Covenant. Now, people don't seem to have remembered that King Jehoash of Israel destroyed the army of Ahaziah of two-tribe Judea about 790 BC. and he went to Jerusalem, took the Judean king as a captive behind his chariot, pulled down 200 yards of the wall, and he took everything from the royal palace and everything from the temple. And he also took the family of Obed-Edom. The family of Obed-Edom are the guardians of the ark.
Mm-hmm.
So he took the ark to the city of Samaria out of Jerusalem, 790 BC. And once you realize that, you get on the trail of the ark. The trail of the people, the trail of the ark.
Mm.
Now, we found an inscription in Etruria in 3 sections. And it tells how people were in a land where there were terrible storms and pestilences and devastations. And they were unhappy and they left. And they followed a little cabinet that rode in a cart. And they came to a land where they were happy. The second section tells how they're in the land where they're again happy, and they are moved from that land to a land where they are very unhappy. And again, they follow a little cabinet that rides in a cart. And the third section tells, again, how they are discontented and not happy where they are, and they decide to move off, and they again follow the little cabinet that rides in a cart, and they finally come to the seashore and take ships. That's Moses leading them out of Egypt, Israel, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the Assyrian Emperors, Tiglath-Pileser III, Shalmaneser IV, Sargon II, and Sennacherib, deporting them by the 100,000 north of Haran. When Sennacherib gets murdered, 687, they took off, going west to Khumri. And they had with them the ark.
Why don't we?
And that's what we've been after.
Right. Why don't we talk a little bit more about that in our next segment? And that's a very interesting story, Alan. The website, then, again, here for people who want to go there and check it out, it's kingarthurslegacy.com. And is that the place where people can pick up copies of your books as well?
Yes, and we also have one where we're expanding the websites. It's going to be realhistory.org. realhistory.org.
Okay, we'll continue with Alan Wilson after this break for our members with more. We continue to jump a little bit back and forth in Alan Wilson and Baram Blackett's research and talk about misdatings, historical chronology, comets, the Grail, the Ark of the Covenant, cultural genocide, and Alan's excursions out into the field and his discoveries of astrological or zodiacal signs in the Khumric Wales. So stay with us as we continue to explore and talk about various aspects of Alan and Baram's work and research. Check arcconvention.com for more information about the conference in Bath, UK on the 20th and the 21st of February. We'll be back after this break.